What's up, y'all? And welcome back to Dad Needs to Talk. I'm your host, Robert, and today I'm going to be talking about a couple of series from the author Inio Asano. And the two series in question are Downfall and Solanin. Now, just for a little bit of background story or whatever, some of you might have heard of both of these series, but this author is also the one who also wrote another series called Goodnight Poon Poon, which I still haven't read. And I think, because looking over like the list of his works, because he also wrote another series that recently ended, Dead Dead Demons, Dead Destruction. But looking across all his works and stuff, I think that these might actually be the first two series of his that I've actually gotten a chance to read. And so, yeah, so buckle in. We're going to take a little a journey because both of these stories are pretty heavy in their respective rights. And I'll go ahead and just say up front, this will be a full potential spoiler discussion involving both of these stories and just kind of how they just like make me think and reflect. And before I get into the series, I'm gonna read the synopsis of both and all that stuff. But the reason why I am doing both of these today is today, the time of me recording this, it is my 1 year anniversary of doing this podcast, the Dad Needs to Talk podcast. And so, of course, I have been doing, and more than likely, because I'm planning on putting this up after I record my actual year anniversary podcast episode. But, of course, in the lead up to, this anniversary, this milestone, I've done a lot of, reflecting on how this first year has been for me as a podcaster, content creator, YouTuber, all that stuff. And also, kind of like looking ahead. And so it's kind of interesting in a way that Downfall is a series that I picked up. It was like one of like the first series that I had picked up last year when I first started collecting manga. But I just hadn't read it yet just because now, granted, I read like the first maybe like 2 or 3 pages some months back. But I just feel like it wasn't the time. And so with me, like I said, doing some reflecting or whatever, I was like, I know what Downfall is about. Maybe now is the time for me to read it. And so midway, like I was like almost like I was maybe like I was over halfway through reading Downfall. And then I don't know, like today has just been like a certain type of mood. Cause had to deal with some family stuff, which led me to not going to work today, and also it's spring break, so my kids are gone, my wife is also gone, so it's kind of just been like a certain atmosphere around me today, around my home decided to read Downfall, and even the weather seemed to know that, hey, this is a certain type of mood today because it also started pouring down raining. But anyway, all that to say that I got to a certain point of me reading this, and then I decided to double check. I was like, I really want to talk about both of these series at the same time because I know that they both were kind of like self-reflective in a way, but just on opposite ends of the spectrum. And so I happened to check that my local Barnes & Noble said that they had a copy in. So I put the book down, drove there as it's pouring raining, picked it up. They only had one copy and came back home, finished reading Downfall, and then jumped immediately into Solanin. So enough of me rambling on. For anybody who might be like, Robert, what are these two series about? So for Downfall, so it follows a manga author by the name of Fukasawa, who he's had a successful serialization of a manga series, And now he's kind of on the other end of that success to where his manga recently ended and he's kind of struggling to find basically like what to do next, what story he's going to write about next, and just kind of like reflecting on basically the last decade of his life. So the actual synopsis is selling copies is the only thing that matters. So what if your first series just ended and you have no idea how to start the next one? Your marriage is breaking up, your pure love of manga has been destroyed by the cruel reality of the industry, and nothing seems to be fill the void, the sucking void inside you. Find the secret combo for a new hit manga series and everything will be okay, right? So that's the synopsis of Downfall. Now Solanin, like I said, is the opposite end of the spectrum. So that series follows Meiko Inoue, is a recent college grad working as an office lady in a job she hates. Her boyfriend Naro is permanently crashing at her place because his job as a freelance illustrator doesn't pay enough rent, and her parents in the country keep sending her boxes of vegetables that just rot in her fridge. Straddling the line between her years as a student and the rest of her life, Mako struggles with the feeling that she's just not cut out to be part of the real world. So, one thing I want to read, because along, with reading these two, Downfall and Solanin. I also read the epilogue for Solanin, which came out a decade after that story finished. So, like I said, I'm gonna read. Actually, you know what? I'm gonna read both, cause like I said, just to give some more context for what I'm about to discuss with both of these series. So. And to kind of like give like some perspective for Asano at different points of his life when he wrote this series. So the afterword at the end of Solanin. I drew Solanin when I was about 24 years old. I had just graduated from college and was feeling a bit insecure about my ability to succeed as a manga artist and whether I would be able to continue to draw manga that were true to myself. In my anxiety and impatience, I felt that all I could do in my manga was try to get a true depiction of the times as experienced by my generation. Lovers, friends, money, jobs, a society with an unclear future, one's own pride, writhing in these multiple entangling factors. Perhaps they are unable to draw any conclusions. Perhaps this instant now is just a small part of their futile daily lives. The only thing that's certain is that they can never return to the days gone by. There's nothing cool about these characters. They're just your average 20-somethings who blend into the backdrop of the city, but the most important messages in our lives don't come from musicians on stage or stars on television. They come from the average people all around you, the ones who are just feet from where you stand. That's what I believe. And that's Asano in 2008. And like I said, spoilers, because this afterthought for this dives into some spoilers for Solanin and, the epilogue and stuff. So the afterword and the Solanin epilogue that came out 11 years after the original release of Solanin. I'm not one to believe in curses and superstition, but back in my 20s, and I'll say as of today, he is, I think, 41. Back in my 20s, I was in the habit of subconsciously making little bets with the divine. For example, I would think things like, if the vending machine gives me all my change in 10-yen coins, I'll get a story serialized. Or if I cross the crosswalk before the signal starts blinking, I'll sell 100,000 copies. But now I hardly ever do that anymore because none of my little wagers ever panned out. And I've had about 7 fortunes work out for me due to my own sweat and blood. It's not the most glamorous thing in the world, but I've gotten used to it and I think it's natural. Solanin was released 11 years ago. At the time, I was super stressed out about it selling more copies, but looking back, I think it sold pretty well. Manga was still selling back then, but even beyond that, I really lucked out with the timing. It got adapted into a film, and I still appreciate the song Asian Kung Fu Generation wrote for it, like any other person, and I still listen to it sometimes. I decided to release this special edition now because Volume 1 and 2 of Solanin were released in an omnibus collection in the US, and it looks so good that I figured why not release it like that here in Japan for its 10th anniversary. But then 11 years actually passed. My bad. I like his humor in this afterthought. Reading it again for the first time in years, the drawings are even worse than I remembered, and there's a lot of unnecessary stuff and a few too many scenes that feature characters throwing up. It makes me wish I could ask my old self if we really needed all that. But I'm sure that's just how the story had to be, with all its imperfections included. It's like when you know the right way to do things in some small corner of your brain, and it makes you want to do it wrong even more. I'm sure it's because back then my readers and I were still young. That's all. After I finished writing chapter 29 of the special edition, I realized that I had barely thought of Takeda, which was the boyfriend in Solanin, at all during the sketchings or writing stages. And it made me feel a little sad because that's what it's like when people die. Takeda was proud and affected, so I never really liked him, even when the story first started serializing. This was the first time I ever felt a little bad for him. Even to this day, I still get asked a lot of whether Takeda's death was an accident or a suicide, and every time I answer non-committally. Back when I was writing it, I tried not to think too much about the reasons behind Takeda's actions, or more accurately, I didn't want to think about the reasons. After all, I'm sure they were stupid, but if I had to explain his motives now, I think that Takeda's own cause of death was his betting on the divine. The type of bet that goes, if I can make it before the light changes, I'm sure everything will work out. He really was pathetic for leaving everything to chance all the way to the end. It was incredibly stupid. Getting results through your own hard work means everything, and if you can't accept that, you'll never progress. I don't think I'll ever like Takeda after all. He's dead. Ever since I started drawing manga, one of my goals has been to write a story that would have staying power even 10 years after the fact. Now it's been 10 years, and I'm releasing a special edition of the story. I am really, truly thankful to everyone who was involved in this project and who have picked up Solanin over the years. From the beginning of the year to about the halfway point, I was working on a story about a middle-aged mangaka. It's called Downfall. As luck would have it, I think it's turned out to be the polar opposite of Solanin. In Solanin, the main characters slowly but surely die as all their dreams wither, whereas in Downfall, the main character has already reached middle age and his dreams have come true, but now he's at a deadlock. I think releasing two works at one time like this has coincidentally resulted in more sales for both, but that's not the reason I wrote Solanin in the first place. Regardless, I'm really happy I was able to give one more layer of significance to this story after 10 years. There are no answers and nothing lasts. So there's really only one thing that matters, and that's right now. I've aged a little, but I still think the same things I did back then and continue to write nonsensical manga to this day. And you? How are you feeling these days? Inio Asano. Now, I spent 14 minutes just kind of talking on, like I said, like kind of just like going over those after those. But like I said, I feel like it's really important just for context for both of these series, and like I said, me reading them back to back and how polar opposite they are, and even Asano himself saying that they are polar opposites of each other makes me really happy in a way that I did read both of these together and that I'm talking about them together. So, like I said, just kind of like parallels and self-reflection because, like Fukasawa in Downfall, you know, he's older, he's had some successes in his life, but throughout the story, you see him self-reflecting and looking back on, yeah, he had this successful series, but he lost so much over the years as far as like, his relationship with his wife has fractured, due to him just being so buried in his work, not paying attention to her. And then just seeing how, he is trying to find meaning and purpose, and finding answers in everything, to the point to where like, he's having affairs with all these young women and stuff like that, to where he's even reflecting on, because the story kind of opens up with him thinking back on basically this girlfriend he had back when he first started being a manga author. And basically she more or less kind of was like one of the first people that really told him like, hey, you were so wrapped up in what you're doing with your manga that you're not even realizing like basically how brutal and how much of a monster that you truly are, in regards to like how he treats other people and stuff, and to how little he pays attention to her and her feelings. And like I said, reflecting on not just this last year of me doing this podcast, but last several years of just my life as well, because it's something that I've realized over recent years and stuff. And like I say, just like really made me reflect as I was reading through Downfall, of how I've let a lot of time, a lot of people kind of come and go from my life, because I was so wrapped up in work, or just excuses as far as like, well, I got this thing to do for work, or my kids have a basketball game, or they got a tournament, or they got a practice, or they got this and that. And then it's like I kind of like think back and reflect, and it's like, man, so many just life lessons and memories have just kind of just passed me by, because sometimes I like look at my kids, and then it's like, whoa, you're taller, you're older. And it's like thinking back on like the last like several years or whatever, and it's like, man, like what all have I really taught you? What all memories do you really have of me? Like is most of your memories just me being strict dad, just be like, hey, clean up your room, do this chore, practice for sports stuff. And so just like, man, time just like flew by. And then, like I said, just like looking at like his Fukasawa's relationship he had with his wife, Machida. And like I said, just like how wrapped up both of them, have or were with the work and stuff over the years. It kind of makes me think about, because coincidentally this past weekend, with the kids going away for spring break to their great grandparents' house, me and my wife for the first time in a long time, like we've had dinner and stuff here and there, but as far as like going out on an adventure, we went bowling and different stuff like that. Like we hadn't like done something like that in years. And so, it's just like seeing how Fukasawa's life just kind of like how broken things are now after, he's had all this success, and he's looking back, you're like, man, maybe if I would have did, or maybe not necessarily like him saying this, but just like people around him kind of like talking to him, and everybody just kind of reflecting on like, man, if maybe you would have just not been so focused on work all the time and just like had more of these moments, Because even myself, I've seen moments to where you know stuff has been kind of rocky in my life with you know marriage, friends, family, all this stuff, and it's like, man, maybe if I just spent a little bit more time, not so wrapped up in whatever, or just taking for granted that something or somebody would always be there. And that kind of ties in with on the opposite end of the spectrum with Solanin, to where they're some of them are fresh out of college. One of their friends, or Kato, he's still in college, but Mako kind of being unsure of the future that she wants for herself, and her not being like fully committed to anything, or I guess like sticking with something for longer than a short period of time. I enjoyed, but was very saddened. Just kind of like seeing the timeline of her and Taneda's relationship, as far as like he was a young guy, or they were both young, when they first met. And, he can move in with her because his job wasn't steady and she was making a lot of money. She was saving up and stuff. And then, one day she basically just decides like, hey, I don't really like my job. I've been working here for some years. I hate my job. And she just decides like, you know what? I'm just going to quit my job. She has money saved up. She can live off of it for maybe a year. She didn't last that long on the money that she saved up because it started going fast. But she did that, and then she had a little bit of time to just kind of like be free and to lounge around. But the thing about having free time, because I've been in that situation before, but to where I've been laid off for a job, and then it's like, oh hey, well, I got all this free time. And there were some benefits to those moments over the years to where it's like, okay, I can spend more time with my kids, help out with stuff around the house and stuff like that. But then it's like sometimes it's like you have so much free time that it maybe works against you, and it's like, yeah, I have all this free time, but I really don't feel like doing nothing. And so, yeah, and then like eventually, when she finally pushed Taneda to like pursue his dream of really, really, really committing to starting up his band or getting his band going. But just seeing that whole moment in the manga of, he finally got the band back together. They were practicing and stuff, and they put a record out, and they got an opportunity to do a deal, and then Mako told the recruiter guy like, no, they're not gonna do it, and then them kind of starting to fracture and stuff and seemingly fall apart, but then they are in the process of coming back together, and then Taneda unfortunately freaking dies and passes away on his way home. And then, we kind of just transition to, we still see, like more context to like various points of their relationship and stuff. But a big part of the back half of the manga was like, how do we move on? And so, like I said, like them being caught up in the moment, but then having their future snatched away from them, taking tomorrow for granted. That's something that has definitely like crossed my mind a lot, in the last year, because for those who might not know or whatever, maybe you've randomly come across this video and have no context for who I am or what I do. But back in episode 0 of my podcast, I had talked about that the reason why I started Daddies to Talk was because I was way down with a lot of grief and sadness, because a few months prior to me starting the podcast, I lost both my older sister and my mom back to back. And it just like really made me think about how much I took for granted the potential of time. It's like, it's one of those things where it's like, my mom was in her 60s, my sister was in her 40s, early 40s, and age doesn't discriminate. Age doesn't care or doesn't have a set order. But I think sometimes we kind of become naive to the idea of like, oh, well, we know someday we're all going to pass away. But foolishly in my mind, thinking that, oh, just the order of things, my mom being older, she would be the first one to go. And if things were to happen or whatever, my mom would be the first one to go. But I'm in my early 30s. I'm 32 right now. Just turned 32 a couple months ago. And like I said, my sister's in her early 40s. So I'm like, oh, we have, I will still have many decades, of time to spend with my sister and to bond and stuff. And so I took for granted how close. My sister lived like an hour away. My mom was over 8 hours away, but my sister was an hour away. But in the like year or so before she passed away, whatever, like, I definitely was not taking full advantage of how close we were to each other, like distance wise and stuff like that. And so it's like when she left, it just like really hit. And so, like I said, just like made me reflect on like, man, you cannot take for granted that, oh, just because you're young or this and that, it doesn't mean nothing. And like I said, like these characters like really went through that. I did enjoy the moment where Taneda's dad came to visit Mako, and he got to spend some time. He cooked for her and stuff like that, and she kind of realized like, oh hey, you are like your son. And he talked about how his passing in a weird way brought the family together because they had kind of been fractured and distant for a long time, because he had told his dad that he wanted to be a musician and all this stuff, and they kind of butted heads about that. But just kind of like in reflection, his dad is just sad that he's gone. And yeah, but yeah, y'all, like I said, just don't take for granted your future. Don't take for granted the present. Don't get so consumed in whatever you are doing, whether it is work, a hobby you have, me doing this podcast and YouTube, being a content creator. And it's okay to slow down along the way. Like I said, that is like something I have struggled with over this last year of being a new content creator and stuff, and like sometimes burning myself out, sometimes accidentally, sometimes knowing that like, hey, maybe I shouldn't be recording late, but still pushing through it. And so, like I said, like having this year of all the stuff I have seen and learned and experienced, and then reading both of these series, it like really just like made the point stick of like, hey, tomorrow isn't promised. You will get to where you're going eventually, but take time, spend time with your spouse, your partner, your kids, your parents, your siblings, your friends, whoever. Because that is something that I am doing at the end of this week when I'm recording this, is I will be going and spending time with some friends. Because I realized over the years, and once again, just like Fukusawa, it's like all these years pass, and then like looking back, and it's like wow, I gave up so much, and not because nobody asked me to, but I just became so closed in a way, and self isolated to where it's like I look back over the last 10 years or whatever, and it's like, man, I really don't have any like many uh adult friends and stuff that I hang out with regularly or whatever. I have people online I'll talk to and stuff, whatever, and I love and appreciate y'all, but I have not been the best at keeping up these in-person relationships and stuff. And I have a bunch of family up here in the area. I have so many friends. I even have classmates and stuff that I grew up with from back home that live up in the area, that we've been in the same area for freaking over a decade. And it's like I haven't seen them once. And so, like I said, just learning lessons from doing this podcast for the last year, from reading both Downfall and Solanin, and it's like I truly need to do better and be better. And I feel like we all can in some ways. I know, some of us do it better than others, but, taking breaks, enjoying the journey, because sometimes, I kind of put so much into this podcast and stuff that, I love it. I enjoy doing this. But, sometimes I kind of, and it's kind of weird to me saying this, but sometimes it's like I kind of admire some of my friends in the community to where they take a week off here or there, or they take a month or so off, and it's like it's okay, because first of all, it's like first of all, I'm new to this. I'm not making no money off of this. This is not my actual livelihood. But even if it was, what would be the point of running yourself into the ground, burning yourself out, regardless of how much you might love what you're doing, whether it be your job or other hobbies or whatever, content creation. It's like, what is the point of running yourself into the ground and getting sick, or losing connections with people, and then you look back and it's like, man, people have come and gone, to where it's like, if I would have just responded to that message to that person that wanted to reach out, but it's like, oh, they're no longer here, they're gone, or that relationship is just broken, and don't know if you'll ever be able to repair it or to refix it. And so yeah, so like I said, I will be taking some time, a couple of days, and going in, seeing some friends that I hadn't seen in a while, some of which I haven't seen in a decade, and just try to start rebuilding those connections. Because like I said, I don't want to be looking back another 10 years from now like Fukusawa, and regardless of, hey, this Danny's Talk blows up, becomes biggest thing on the planet, I don't want to be looking back and be like, well, what all was sacrificed along the way for me to get here? And and same thing with, on the flip side, with Mako them and Solanin, I also don't want to be too afraid of the future and too afraid to take chances. Which, there have been things I have done in this last year based off of pure gut and instinct that I'm glad I did, or things that I was scared or unsure about that I'm glad I took a chance and did it. Because like prime example, like, me going to my first anime convention, fall of last year, my wife had surprised me with some tickets, and it's kind of, and I ended up deciding to go. And same thing to another smaller event that I found out about because I had went to the anime convention, and that other smaller event I was kind of like, I don't know, this is it was a DFW podcast festival, um, and once again, very happy I went. I met so many awesome people. Uh, and even got some guy got a freaking asked me about my podcast T-shirt and a Best Buy gift card. Like I said, on top of all these awesome people I got to meet and connections I got to make, and me doing this podcast, me reaching out to people, and just really connecting. And so, for anybody that might still be here, 30 plus minutes into me talking, I just wanted to say I encourage you to try. If there's anything that you have a interest or a passion in, or something that you've just been wanting to do, like I said, whether it be starting a podcast or some book you've been wanting to read, or some hobby you've been wanting to do, or some place you've been wanting to go, do it. Do it. Because worst case scenario, you do it, you try it, you go there, and it's like, okay, that didn't work out, or I didn't really like it, or it's not what I thought it would be. But there's always a chance that it could be the best thing that ever happened to you in your life. And I'll say me doing this podcast has been one of the best life decisions I have ever made. Just because I have met so many amazing people along the way, and gotten exposed to so many new things, new ideas, new stories along the way that I might not have never read or watched or seen or experienced if I hadn't taken that first step, in hitting record and hitting publish on that first episode I did a year ago today. And so, like I said, we all do need to take time to reflect both on where we have been, the things we have been through, but to also not be afraid to look towards tomorrow and to look towards, what lies ahead. Because, life is unexpected. Unexpected things happen every day, all the time. But don't let that scare you away from trying. Don't wait until, and it doesn't even have to be not waiting until you're, an older person or whatever, but it could even be as simple as like, hey, don't wait until a year from now or a month from now, and then and then end up like Fukasawa, regretting some things that happened, or end up hating the thing that you started doing because you loved it. And one other thing about with Downfall that was interesting was like, the little fling he was having with Yui, the little hostess young lady or whatever, that had the eyes that reminded him of his first girlfriend, his first big crush or whatever, when he first started doing the manga stuff. And then the moment when he finally, a couple years had passed, and he finally got passion to do another series. And I was kind of interested to see like how this would play out, but like throughout the story, he had a fan that would constantly tweet at him and comment on his stuff to me like, hey, I loved your series, it helps me out, I love it, keeps going, I can't wait to see what you do next. And then eventually he started replying back to this person, be like, hey, thank you for your support, I'm glad you're liking it or whatever. And then when she actually showed up in person, and then basically being like, hey, your series, what you do, your book saved my life. because of what you were doing, I could continue to go on for another day. And she called him a god. She's like, I love what you do. You're a god. And he just he teared up or whatever, but he also is like, you just don't get it. Now that comment, I feel like it can kind of go both ways, to where like he's talking both to the girl, but to where he's also talking to himself. Just because, like I say, he kind of got so deep into what he was doing with the manga stuff to where he started hating it. And, that's definitely something that, I try to be, I'm trying to make sure I'm being conscious about, because like I said, I just hit the 1 year mark. Hopefully there's many more years to come of this. But one thing I just want to make sure that I don't ruin this for myself, to where I end up, hating it and loathing it. But anywho, I've kind of gone on a long divergent tangent or whatever. But like I said, just kind of like reflective thoughts of how both of these series made me feel. Like I said, I am. It was a lot, that was a lot of heaviness to read back to back in more or less close to one sitting. Downfall and Solanin. But like I said, I am glad that I did, and I'm glad that I did it before I record my anniversary episode. Because like I said, I wanted to, as I'm reflecting on stuff, whatever, I wanted to read both of these series because of their synopsis, and now that I've actually read them and seeing both ends of the spectrum that they cover, with somebody that's had success reflecting back on how much or seeing how broken things were along the way to his success, to somebody and some characters who are just starting out and are unsure of their future, but also having life, having love snatched out from under them in the blink of an eye. Like I said, just really gives me, puts a lot of stuff into better perspective for me. Cause like I said, a lot of the stuff from both of these series I've been thinking about for a while. But like I said, just like having a concrete story for both. Like I said, just like I don't want to end up like Fukasawa, to where I'm looking back and like, man, my marriage is broken, my kids don't like me. Like, what did I teach them growing up? What did they learn from me? But also, like I said, not being afraid of tomorrow and what the future holds, and not being afraid to take chances, like they did in Solanin. Which, speaking of which, when I realized that, okay, Solanin is the name of a song, that was really awesome. When that popped up, because at first I thought that the girl's name was Solanin, because you just see a cover of a girl with the word Solanin, but but overall, and I know I really didn't talk too much specifics about the series or whatever, but I feel like I said, at this point, if you're watching this deep into it or whatever, hopefully you've already read it and you're just kind of like wanted to hear just my perspective of how both of these series reflects on actual life and stuff. But with that being said, I think I need to go ahead and wrap this up. But like I said, I will at some point in the future. It might be many months from now, but at some point in the future, I will have to read Goodnight Poon Poon, as well as what's the other series? The Dead Demons. What's it called? Yeah, Dead Demons. Destruction. I definitely want to read that as well at some point too. But that will be way down the road. Like I said, reading both of these back to back, some heavy stuff that, like I said, I need to kind of go into some lighter heart stuff, or just something not as heavy for a little while. But I appreciate everybody that is watching or listening to this episode and have stuck with me all the way to the end of this episode. And those of you that have been along with me, been following with me along for the journey of this year of doing the podcast. Like I said, I am doing a lot of reflection, but also, taking chances on some stuff. One of which I feel weird even plugging this, but just to kind of just say it and put it out there. Because this is more so just like a, hey, just putting it out there, whatever, not really expecting too much from it. But, I am, well, first of all, I want to say, if you're not already, make sure you subscribe to the channel. Make sure you're following the podcast on all podcast services so you can get the audio or the video on podcast streaming services or on YouTube. Follow me on all social medias at Dad Needs to Talk. And also check out my newly launched Patreon, patreon.com/Dad Needs to Talk, where that is, like I said, is basically just the thing to where I'm putting it out there. I will talk about it more in specifics on the actual podcast anniversary episode, but just know it is just something out there to where if anybody enjoys what I'm doing and just wants to show some extra love and support, it's there. But I will continue to put out my reviews and stuff for everybody. But like I said, just like, hey, maybe you might get some stuff earlier, maybe like a day or however earlier than everybody else, but eventually everything will still continue to be how it has been. But I don't want to get too deep into plugging and all that stuff, whatever. But anyway, y'all have an awesome day and week. Like I said, make sure to take time for yourself, treat yourself to something nice, read some manga, watch some anime and TV, play some video games, and just remember to live your life. And with that, I am out. Thank you, Inio Asano, for both Downfall and Solanin. And I will say, I also appreciated I forgot, I barely even touched on, I appreciated the epilogue as well. Like I said, just getting to see these characters again, a little bit older, and, them kind of have moved on. Mako, she is now about to be married. She's expecting a child. Seeing the band still getting together and doing stuff, whatever. It was just really nice to just see, those characters again. And I can't even imagine for anybody that might have read Solanin back when it originally came out, and then over a decade later getting another piece of the story. Beautiful. Very beautiful. But yeah, and in the name, or as the maiden on my shirt from Bloodborne says, may you find your worth in the waking world. And with that, I'm out. I'll catch y'all on the next thing. Love y'all. Thank y'all so much for everything. Peace.